This man is worth $500. And this man's going to collect. And he lives by bounty law.
You don't ever bring him in alive, now do you, Jake?
Not when there's 3 of them and 1 of me.
What are you looking at, bounty killer?
Looking at an ugly owl who's about to get his jaw busted. Amateurs try and take men in alive. Amateurs usually don't make it.
Whether you're dead or alive, you're just a dollar sign.
Hello everyone, happy October. Welcome to this frankly triumphant dev diary about something that has been plaguing me for the past 2-3 months. Something core, the Dark Messiah, that I have finally been able to not only understand, but manipulate and almost recreate in such a way that lets you actually use it in multiplayer. If you've been following, you already know what it is, or if you can read the title of the video, but I'll say it anyway. Yes, I have solved the multiplayer rope issue for Dark Messiah Co-op. You can now have more than one player on a rope at a time without any of the networking problems that comes with it, any of the permission and even the position issues that come with it. Hell, you could have up to 200 players on it, and that's just an arbitrary number. Really, you can have as much as you want. It's just something that I set in there because God knows you're not going to have more than 200 people. Although maybe, you know, if you want to burn your PC, but that's besides the point. But you have no idea how big of an issue this is. If you've just been, you know, this is your first video or the first time you're hearing about this, then, you know, you started at the right video here, because I want to do this dev diary a little bit differently because I want to explain sort of what was going on with the ropes, as well as sort of the reasons why it was happening and some of the high level explanations of how it was solved. And on top of that, be able to discuss what it means now that this has been solved, because it may just seem like one sort of single piece of gameplay, but not only is it a critical piece of gameplay because it's required to progress in moments, but also being able to understand those internal logic choices that were made means that we can now make our own choices to pretty much turn God knows how many other entities and other features into true multiplayer support. No like stupid little fix where you have to send the player in one direction and not in the other, or, you know, detour it or anything. No, we get to actually fix it, and it works exactly as it should with that one thing. So buckle up. I'm gonna take us all the way back to the beginning, discuss everything that was going wrong and how it was fixed. So let's start with the obvious question. What the hell are the ropes in Dark Messiah? Why is it such a big deal? I mean, it's a goddamn rope, right? Well, in the source engine, ropes aren't all that special. You've seen them 1,000 times. They're cutting edge at the time, but you probably don't even notice them anymore. You know, ragdolls hanging from trees, the tires swinging Ravenholm, all sorts of stuff like that. What makes Dark Messiah special is that these ropes serve a dual purpose. You can jump on them as the player to climb up and down them as if they were almost like a portable ladder. And on top of that, you would be able to make them wherever you want with a special weapon called the rope bow. That weapon alone is why this thing needed to be done, because that weapon allows you to access certain secrets, allows you to traverse the maps, even just do whatever you want, have creativity in the approaches that you have in combat. So you could spawn ladders anywhere to solve some of these map, you know, problems, but you can't restrict the player. That's just not in the DNA of Dark Messiah. So that is the initial point for this entire thing. So now comes the next question. Why didn't it work in multiplayer? And this is kind of a snowball answer because it didn't work for a lot of reasons. Well, let's start with the basics. If you jumped on the rope, everything was going to be just fine. You're going to go up and down that rope like no problem. You jump off, you do whatever you want with it, you die on that rope, there is no issues with you not being on that rope. It's when the second guy jumps on the rope that things get stupid. not only will you teleport to their position, your camera will also teleport to their position, your angles will match their angles, and then suddenly, if you didn't crash from the sudden movement, if one of you guys decided to jump off, the other guy is stuck in limbo at a, I would say, 86-degree roll angle, like you look like a confused dog, and if you tried to get off, that's it, server's going down. So you had an immediate crashing issue and a guaranteed crashing issue that would happen if you even tried to get on this rope. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because on top of that, had you had died at some point, you wouldn't be able to interact with the ropes. If you had tried to create a rope with a rope bow, if somebody else saw it, things would be completely invisible. They wouldn't even know what was happening. They wouldn't even know a rope was there. So there was a bunch of things that needed to get fixed down the line, but the only way that that was going to be solved was to try and get more understanding as to what was happening under the hood. Because this rope is not like the Source Engine rope. It may look like it. The visuals might be the same with the links and all sorts of extra keyframes that are added so you can apply physics and, you know, make it actually sway in the wind. But they were not functionally the same when you actually looked at it. And that would be the next step here. Let's think about what we knew from the previous iterations of our multiplayer patches and then see if we can try and apply it here. We know that it breaks when two players jump on it. That immediately tells us that there's a single variable in there that's being overwritten, because otherwise it shouldn't make any difference, right? On top of that, positions start getting teleported, angles getting teleported, etc. So you also know that those key variables must also be shared. So we would need to find a way to completely separate variables between the players. Now, the solution that I've opted in for is, I think, frankly, the best solution given what it is and given just the limitations of the Source Engine, and that is to have completely separate variables for each player when they jump on the rope. I've created a custom structure so that I can use it, and you have those key points of information, you know, their angle, where they are on the rope, all sorts of things like that. But you need to be able to apply that to the player. It's not enough just to store that information. You need to know where and how it needs to get added. Because if you don't add it properly, then you're going to just have a completely different issue on your hands. And that was actually one of the hardest things that I had to experience. I literally had to go in to, I would think, I must have done 1,000 functions that I was slowly figuring out this entire class, figuring out, you know, how did the animation play when somebody jumps on the rope? How does the camera position get in there? How do those vectors come into place? You know, the angle. If you're on a rope, you're really only moving one position, right? So those questions were pretty much the driving force for everything that I was doing here in terms of understanding what was happening with the ropes. I was able to get a lot of intel just by having those assumptions, having reverse engineered this enough, and learning a bit about how the Source Engine works from my own prior experience. I was able to deduce that information, right? So I went into the code. The first thing I verified was immediately the entity being attached. There's a variable called the attach entity or something like that, and it was getting updated whenever something touched the rope. Obviously, if the player touches the rope, they become the person on the rope, right? Simple stuff. And likewise, it would immediately get, you know, updated whenever somebody jumped on it. But it's like, well, how does the player still know that they're on the rope? And so logically, that must be stored also on the player, right? Because they can't keep pulling that information from the rope to figure out whether they're still on the rope if it keeps getting updated. And sure enough, there was another variable in there. It was attached to a player. It's literally called HRope. It's a handle that just keeps track of what rope they're on. Super. So with that information, I would be able to find out what's writing those things and be able to see what's updating and when it's being updated, and then update it at the right time when somebody jumps off. That was easy. So that immediately solved the first issue. Somebody jumping off, causing the other person in limbo, but also leading to the second person jumping off and crashing. So that's easy. Done deal. But we still got a couple more collisions. Since it's a single variable problem, that means that all the other variables must also be single, right? So the vector position, those actually weren't even vectors. There was a single position because logically the rope is always fixed on a single axis. So the person who's going on the rope can only go up or down the rope. That means it only needs to track one variable, that is the Z coordinate of the player. And then it would do some strange interpolation. It makes it basically smooth you going up and down the rope, because otherwise you'd be teleporting. It'd look disgusting. Nobody wants disgusting in their game, right? So with that found, I can now find out when are they going up and down the rope. Let's see how it would handle this. Well, there's a function called the calculate absolute position function. It's used for every entity, and I would eventually find this function. This is probably one of the hardest ones to find, because if you ever played Dark Messiah, you know that this thing has a very specifically and different designed movement, right? You take a step, your player model puts his left foot forward. You walk backwards, you go a little slower. That's simple movement stuff. But even jumping, vaulting, all sorts of extra stuff that need to be handled, they are being handled through this calculation function. So I couldn't find it in native ways. I needed to find it in some other special way. Additionally, the way that it was handled in Dark Messiah, in terms of how it was compiled in code, meant that it wasn't immediately accessible in the positions that I would think that they would be accessible. This goes on to some very specific technical thing about virtual functions, but I will leave that for a supplementary video, and also the knockout, tell all thing that I usually do, where I post the actual code and all sorts of stuff like that. So I will continue my rambling. Once we found out the distance variable, I did the logical thing of pretty much trying what I did with the entity attachment variable, right? Obviously, if somebody's moving, I can check when that variable is changing, and then I would just update it for that person and then hope for the best. But unfortunately, things aren't that easy. If I tried to update it for one player, it would still update for the second player regardless of how I did it. And I was trying to figure out, well, why would that happen? So I looked down the tree, see sort of the order of everything, and it would seem like, well, I must have been doing it correctly. Everything was fine on the server. But why is my camera still wrong? Why am I in the wrong position? I jump off the rope, I'm in the right position. I didn't think that it would be tied to the client side. So the client, which is the person that is playing the game, right? It's your computer. They were pretty much taking those vectors, or floats that was used there, taking that position that you were on the z-axis and being like, okay, I'm gonna put the camera right there, we're gonna call it a day, I'm gonna go to sleep. Pretty much kept doing that regardless of what I changed it to. And I realized, well, crap, this is a networking issue, isn't it? Because now I need to figure out how the hell to network this information properly. Now this one is the one that must have taken the longest amount of time, manipulating and trying every single piece of networking mumbo jumbo, God knows what I could possibly do. You know, it's like creating Frankenstein. You keep throwing things, and then suddenly the gift of life is given to your work. So I tried not only manipulating what gets sent to the player, completely blocking what gets sent to the player, and doing all sorts of stuff that I frankly am grateful that I learned, and I'll get to that one later. But ultimately, the solution that I ended up using was that, well, okay, fine. If the position and everything is still being set properly in the player, then I must just not use this variable. That's the only way, right? And the logic that came with that is that, well, if I'm always moving in the game normally, my camera is going where I'm moving, which means that my camera knows where I am. I don't need that variable to tell me where I am. As long as I put myself in the right position on the server, the person, the client, will just put their camera in their position where their eyes are, no problem. And that hunch was absolutely correct. I would eventually go into those client-side functions, try and find the camera position, all sorts of things like that, eventually fix that, and then find a bunch of accessory issues that came along with doing that. You know, the player model, if you know about Dark Messiah and you look down, you see you got yourself in full scope. You can see your entire body. But that actual model usually is fixed to a certain angle so that when you look up and down, because the way that Source handles the view angles is it would be pretty much unrestricted, but the actual model that's there would be restricted so people don't see you laying down on the floor. And, well, that logic did carry over to the ropes. If you climbed up the rope and you started looking up and down the rope, you would see your body bend in an unnatural way, and then suddenly you would be planking and holding onto your rope with your feet. So, no, that isn't going to slide. So I would eventually have to go through those camera functions and try to discern what is the actual function that is in charge of manipulating those angles and, you know, all sorts of things like that for the model, not for the camera. Again, another host of work that was pretty much given to me. But alas, I did find it, and I did some simple patches, you know, and it just worked, right? So great news there. So now the client side is being handled properly, and I have the ability to network any information I want. So with that, I now have to go back to the server side because there's still a couple of issues. For starters, that position is not completely reliable. Apparently the function that I initially found was not the function, so I had to go back and find another function, which would then cause me to stumble upon the next issue, because I honestly didn't even know, because as I was testing these things, I had my laptop and that thing must have lit on fire halfway through my actual testing. But with it repaired, I was able to see that when you jump on the rope goes invisible. Completely invisible, right? And this is because the networking state is now changing. I'm no longer writing those variables, and so the rope doesn't exist. It has no reason to tell the person that isn't on the rope that they are on a rope. So what the hell do you do? Well, since I now have some knowledge in networking, I would be able to go find what's called the transmission function in the source engine, which basically dictates who gets to see what. And by setting that state to pretty much restrict itself to always draw unless they're not visible, you know, obviously you should be seeing rope through walls. By setting that position, or flag rather, in the actual set transmit function, I was able to fix that issue, and now you would have the person going on the rope, you'd have another person go on the rope, their data would be saved, and then whenever they do a movement, we clock them right before they do the movement. We say, hey, here's the new updated rope information, and then we just, as soon as they're done doing the calculations, we take it all right back. We keep it all, we can store the new information, but we put it right back to default. It's as if nobody touched this rope. We've effectively, by doing this, multiplied the single rope to some arbitrary number that we get to choose, because that's just how many people are playing the game. And so, with that done, I no longer have to sing the ballad. I can now play through any map I want, no clip, no restrictions, and it would just work. It works for the rope bow, works for any regular chains. It's completely agnostic, no entity or custom things required, and it inadvertently also fixed some ladder issues, because it was brought up to my attention, as I mentioned in the previous dev diary, and I was showing off the new map, that this issue may also exist with ladders, because ladders in the source engine usually just set your movement state and move you up and down, but in Dark Messiah they actually play an animation and they actually move you based on the animation, so you would need to have some sort of thing bound to you. But luckily, by doing this, I was able to also solve that issue. Granted, I do still have an issue where the animation kind of T-poses when you are the second player on, but that's just a simple state change. It's something that's completely easy to fix. I just haven't gotten around to doing it because I want to get a new video out. I want to sort of treat the people to see how much progress I've made thus far. But the reason why, now I'm going to circle back to why this is such a big deal. Not only does this, again, allow you to play through almost every mission without any problems, but it also opens the door for a bunch of networking fixes and basically allowing me to construct my own networking infrastructure to support multiple players. It technically already does this. The source engine is not a bad engine. It has already accounted for the idea that there will be multiple players with proxies, send tables, all sorts of extra things like that, which are handling the data being sent to the person. But by being able to control the transmission, being able to define those variables, being able to do all sorts of extra stuff through reverse engineering, not through compilation or anything like that, I would be able to take any problem, any entity that may occur, may find it, whatever. We can take that and do the same thing we did to the rope. Multiply it per player, make it special for everyone, and you would just be able to have it as if it really was meant to be played by multiple people. And that is just exciting for me, because I originally I look back a few months and I'm like, Jesus Christ, how am I supposed to solve this? I'm gonna have to write like a whole host of things for it. I don't even know where to begin. I'm doing this all sorts of crazy, trying to fix this thing in the dumbest way possible. But you progress, you learn, you find the wrong function, you get the right one. You find the wrong implementation, you get the right one. You find out now that you have all these right pieces that maybe there's another path to walk down, and you take that path and it turns out to be filled with beauties and gold. So yes, now that this is solved, let's talk about the next steps. I had that list of stuff that needs to be done. They don't seem nearly as difficult to complete now that I have a better idea of what's going on. I've pretty much recreated the rope functions and all sorts of things like that, so I can call them myself. I have the networking tools to my advantage. Simple things like, for example, the orc grabbing a player and then teleporting the local player. This is no longer even fathomable of being an issue. Like, you literally just need to update that variable based on their target. Like, this is something that I wouldn't have been able to do without finding the core functions that I needed. And being able to basically look at the Dark Messiah developers' mind and think, wow, this is how this works. I actually understand this, and now I know exactly how they wrote other things. It just, the amount of insight that was gained alone is worth it. This is an extremely long dev diary, and you know, it's just because I'm really excited. I've been stuck on this for, oh my god, months. Again, I can't keep saying this. Months I've been stuck on this issue. I've been pretty much flipping the whole house on this thing, trying to understand everything, and to be able to create that solution, to get that much insight that I can now do prediction stuff on what other things are being done. You know, to be able to retain the image of Dark Messiah, to not have to compromise, that's the exact thing. No compromises, making this thing work as was intended. And that, you know, that's the end goal here, to make it feel like you really were supposed to play this in multiplayer. So once I fix the rest of these issues, I will hopefully do a beta release, you know, have a little game night. We'll see what happens. I don't really know when that's going to be. You know, I'm sure people are like already, oh my god, he said something that he's going to release it soon. But I am not in a rush to try and make sure that this thing gets released by, like, you know, winter or whatever the hell. This is something that needs to be taken with the utmost patience. You make a bad solution, it's going to live with you for the rest of development. So just taking the time, making it work. You know, it's a semi-apology for me not making the dev diaries. However, I have been active on Twitter and Discord, and even occasionally on Knockout I would do posts. Just sometimes I feel bad posting on Knockout because the thread gets bumped, and then it's like, oh, by the way, I'm still alive. And like, that's the update, so maybe a little hesitant there. But for Twitter and stuff like that, absolutely. And really, I would also be posting on YouTube, but YouTube has got this thing where you can't post those like little blog things unless you have 1,000 subscribers. If you're not subscribed, maybe you help out that number. But in any case, it's finally over. The pain is over. So yes, I'm hoping to have another video, probably a supplementary video. We talk about more technical stuff, or maybe not. Maybe I just keep that on Knockout. I have to really decide depending on the feedback to this video. And I also want to do another video to show off, now that we have all this stuff done, what does the game look like? Because the first, I think I put it maybe a year ago, the first raw session with Riddick, this was in the E3 demo, and you could sort of see some cracks coming through. It didn't look fine, but, you know, some cracks. We'll see, you know, let's try a real mission this time. So if you have a mission that you want to see me play with somebody, some testing, so we can put that into the next session, by all means let me know. If you have any feedback for this video, let me know. If I didn't answer any questions, let me know. You can talk to me on Twitter, you talk to me on Discord. Like I said, I'm always active. I'm ready to answer anything, even the stupidest questions. So yeah, subscribe, follow on Twitter, come talk to me somewhere. I'll post an update on ModDB. I'll see you guys around. Thank you for being patient, thank you for the support, and I'm gonna go sleep like a bear somewhere. I don't even know. The mind must rest.